Hi guys, today we move on to our first accounting report of your accounting career. So we're looking at statements of receipts and payments. So that's what we'll get to by the end of the lesson, once we make sure that we've all gone through and totaled all the journals correctly. So we've got the right accounting data to put into the financial report. So that's where we are today. So just to recap, the assignment is being marked on all parts, so make sure that you've completed all parts today. If we can't find it, a part or it's incomplete, you get 0 for that particular section, and that'll impact on your overall mark. So to date, you should have answered all the questions in tasks 1 to 4. They should all be saved in your 10 Commerce folder. Then last week you should have done your task 5 journals, entering the journals in the cash receipts journal, the cash payments journal, the credit fees journal, and the credit purchases journal. We need all of that up to date, and that's why we're going over it relatively slowly, and we've given you ideal answers because that forms the basis of completing correct accounting reports. So we need to make sure that everybody at that particular point is up to date and correct. So what are we doing today? Today we're going to total those journals. Some of you may have already done that, which is fantastic. But what we need to do is have them all totaled because we need to transfer the totals into the reports. So obviously you can total those manually, or preferably you use a formula, and I'll quickly show you those formulas further in this presentation. You would get more marks for doing a formula within your spreadsheet as opposed to manually working them out, because if you manually work them out, it takes away some of the functionality from your spreadsheet. We are then going to complete the statement of receipts and payments. So I'll discuss that with you shortly, it being your first accounting report, what actually goes into a statement of receipts and payments. But first, we're just going to do a recap of the ideal solutions for each journal. So I'll put those up one by one. You can pause the video as you go or take a screenshot and compare them to the results you've got to make sure you now have the correct answers. So here we go first, the cash receipts journal. That's the first one we're going to look at. We now move on to the cash payments journal. And now the credit fees journal. And finally, the credit purchases journal. So I'm now going to show you a quick way to total your journals. Some of you may have already done this. It's pretty straightforward. If you've had any experience with Excel or Sheets in the past, it's a pretty easy process to total a column. But for those that haven't, we'll just quickly show you how to do a couple of them and then you can move on. So I'll have a look at the cash receipts journal, just give you an example and show you how to total a couple of the columns, and then you'll be able to move on and do the other ones yourself. Okay, so this is the cash receipts journal. What we want to do here is where the yellow lines are, we want to put a total in here, being the total of the entire column where all of the transactions are entered into that particular column. Even though we've only got 3 transactions here from Byers, KC, Hi-Fi and McReynolds, we'll still run a total from the very top, even though it's blank, all the way to the bottom, and we'll get it to total in this column here, where in the cell where it's yellow. So you highlight the cell that's yellow where you want the total to go, and to start entering a formula, you type equals. And what we're going to do is we want to add the columns. So this is called sum. So we go equals sum, and then we open a bracket. So we do a bracket, and then you put your cell at the top cell where you want to total from, and you'll see that that total or that cell has a little highlight. Then what you want to do is do shift and you shift dot dot, so it's a colon. And what it does then, it gives you up the top, we've got sum, open brackets, D4, that's from the first cell, to D4. So what we're going to do, because we've now opened up the column and the total that we want to total, we just now use our down arrow and see how that now changes from D4 to D7, to D8, to D9, to D10, to D11, to D12, to D13. We're now at the bottom of the column. That whole column is highlighted, so anything in those cells, anything in those particular cells is going to add up and is going to display in the yellow cell on the bottom. Now all we've got to do to complete our formula is now close the formula off with a close your bracket up the top. We've now got equals sum, open bracket, D4, colon, D13, close your bracket. If we press enter now, we now have a sum of 6,050. Now, if you roughly have a look at your accounts receivable, and you can see 1,760, 2,200 and 2,090, it does equal 6,050. So let's just do that again in the next column. We're in the cell that we want the formula to go into, so the total to go in. So we go equals to start our formula. Sum, we're doing the sum, which is adding the column. We open our brackets, we highlight the top of the column, then we hit colon, which is the dot dot, which is above the semicolon. Then we scroll down to highlight the whole column all the way to the bottom, close our bracket and enter. There's nothing in others, so we don't need to run that one at the moment, but we'll go across and do the GST column, equals, sum, open brackets, highlight the top of the colon, scroll down, close your bracket, 142, and we'll just do the total just to finish it off. Equals, sum, open your bracket, highlight the top of the column, then you want to shift to get your colon, scroll down to highlight everything, close your bracket, and there's our total. So that's how we total a column using a formula. So I would now expect that you could do that rather than just adding them up. And now if you want to do it, you've got to do a check anyway, because the way that these journals work, all of these columns, accounts receivable, fees, other, and GST, equal the bank. So if you do a quick check on your calculator, 6,050 plus 1,418 plus 142 should equal $7,069.80. Some of you might say 142 looks a bit strange. There's a rounding formula in that for the GST, but it should actually be 141.80 or something like that to balance to $7,609.80. But I hope that makes sense to you so far. So once everything's totaled, we now move on to tackling our first report, which is a statement of receipts and payments. So in the next slide, we'll look at what is a statement of receipts and payments. So the good news is it's a pretty straightforward report. It only deals with cash transactions. It looks at transactions when they affect your bank account. So the cash receipts journals are deposits into your bank account, and your cash payments journal are payments out of your bank account. They're two of the journals. So they affect your bank account immediately a transaction is entered into those journals. Your credit fees journal, it doesn't affect your bank account until some point in the future when you actually get paid for the invoice that you've issued to your customer. And on the other hand, your credit purchases, they don't affect your bank account until you actually go and pay the supplier who has given you some supplies where you haven't actually paid for them yet. So everything in the cash receipts journal is a cash receipt. So you don't enter the total though, just make sure that the total is a check to make sure that all the other columns add up okay. So you don't enter the total, otherwise you'd be double entering your transactions. And everything in the cash payments journal is a cash payment. You don't enter the total again. It's just to double check that all of your columns add up correctly. So you enter all of your cash receipts, all of your cash payments only in those two journals, and that's what comprises a statement of receipts and payments. So when you take away your total payments, and from your total receipts, you'll end up with either a surplus, which means you've got more receipts than payments, or you'll end up with a deficit where you've got more payments than receipts. So the little snapshot I've got here, that's from the bottom of the cash receipts and cash payments journal, as the report shows, you then add your bank balance at the beginning of the period to your cash surplus or the deficit to work out what your closing bank balance is. So that's all the statement of receipts and payments are, totaling all your cash receipts, taking away all your cash payments, working out whether you had a surplus or deficit, and then adding it or subtracting whatever your surplus or deficit was from the bank account balance that you have at the start of the period. So Gil's Garden Gurus have 10, it tells us that we have 10,000 at the start of the period. You then have to work out if they make a surplus or a deficit, what effect does that have on the $10,000 opening balance. So one final tip for you as you go off now and do your statement of receipts and payments. You've got your journals down the bottom, your cash receipts, your cash payments journal, your credit fees journal, your credit purchases journal, and now in the orange you've got the reports. So the only thing that we're focusing on today is the orange tab, which is receipts and payments. If you click on that orange tab, this is the report that you're looking to fill in. So Gil's Garden Guru's statement of receipts and payments for the month of January. And we've got the transactions for the month of January in the journal. So we're only looking at the cash receipts journal and the cash payments journal. So now what you've got to do is you've got to transfer the items from, or the totals from each column from your cash receipts and your cash payments. So rather than just writing them in, what you can do is do a neat trick of getting the Excel formula or the Excel sheet to drag those totals in. So for example, we'll just look at capital. If you highlight where you want capital to go, so we want capital to go in that first dollars column. If you just shift plus, so you just want to type in plus, so you need to go shift because the plus is above the equals. So you type plus, you can then go back, while that's open as a formula, you can then go back to the cash receipts journal tab, and we can see that we had under capital, there was no capital. Okay, so we'll ignore that one and we'll go back. So let's go back to fees. So we've got fees that accounts receivable that we've received. We know we had some of those. So those accounts receivable that were received in fees received were from our invoices. They have now paid for their invoice, and when they've paid for their invoice, you put the money in the bank. So it's accounts receivable. We know that's in our cash receipts journal. So we'll hit it. We'll do plus on the accounts receivable. We'll go across into the cash receipts journal, and we see we do have accounts receivable, and we do have a total for accounts receivable of 6,050. So we want to drag that 6,050 into the receipts and payments. So I've now clicked on it. It's now highlighted. If I now press enter, it now automatically takes us back to the receipts and payments, and it's put that 6,050 into the accounts receivable tab where we wanted it, and total receipts at the moment has given us an automatic formula. So if we just highlight the 6,050, it gives us a formula up here going plus CRJ, which means cash receipts journal, and the cell where it's dragging the figure from. So that's how you get the items in there. You put them in this first dollar column, and then the second dollar column is where the totals are added. So if you enter all of your figures, if there's no capital, etc., and there's no interest, you just leave them as blank. You don't need to put zeros there, just leave them completely blank. Only put items in where there are figures that need to be entered. The accounts receivable is entered. You'll need to enter one for GST received. You'll need to put that in as well. And they'll progressively total as you go through. So give that a go. Hopefully that helps you transfer the items from the journals into the receipts and payments report that you've got there. Okay, so now it's your turn. So what we want you to do is complete that statement of receipts and payments and work out what the closing bank balance is. And then we need you to answer that and send it by email to either myself, Mr. Windley, or Mrs. Clement, so we can see how you've gone and compare it to what the ideal answer is. And again, we'll go through solutions as we go along a little bit further along. But that should be enough for you to continue on today, tackle your first accounting report, and we look forward to seeing the results. If you need questions answered along the way, just please feel free to come into Google Chat and ask us what's anything that you need to help you through. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing the results from you very soon. All the best. Bye for now.